I never thought my 28th birthday would end with me standing on a cold Boston sidewalk, holding nothing but my purse and the keys to a car that suddenly felt like my only real home. The October wind cut through my dress, the same navy blue one I'd worn to every family dinner for the past 3 years, thinking it made me look respectable enough for their standards. To keep listening to this beautiful and special story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Write your name and the city you're watching from so I can include a special shout out for you in an upcoming story. The porch light was still on behind me, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn where I used to play as a child, but the warm yellow glow felt cold now. Foreign, my father's words still echoed in my ears. You made your choice, Emily. The military over family. Now live with it. I had driven to their house that evening expecting the usual stiff birthday dinner. The same passive-aggressive comments about my career. The familiar dance we'd been doing since I enlisted 6 years ago. Instead, I got a 30-minute lecture about how I'd abandoned my responsibilities and embarrassed the family name by choosing the Air Force over the law degree they'd planned for my life. Pack whatever you left here, my mother had said, her voice sharp as winter glass. Tonight, the strangest part wasn't the cruelty. I'd grown used to their disappointment. It was the finality, the way my father wouldn't meet my eyes, the way my mother handed me a cardboard box like she was returning borrowed items to a neighbor. Standing there in the suburban silence, I realized I'd been waiting for this moment my entire adult life, not wanting it, but preparing for it. The military had taught me that sometimes retreat isn't surrender, it's strategy. I got in my car and drove into the city, toward the lights and the noise and the life I'd built without them. Chapter 2. She came with words that burn. 3 days later, I was still staying at the downtown Marriott when my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Claire. We hadn't spoken since my deployment 2 years ago, but apparently family drama had a way of bringing people out of hiding. Mom told me what happened. You really screwed up this time. I stared at the message while sipping coffee in the hotel lobby, watching business people rush past with their important lives and their intact families. The text felt like a paper cut, small but surprisingly sharp. Claire had always been the golden child, the one who married her college boyfriend and gave our parents the grandchildren they'd been demanding since I turned 25. She lived 40 minutes away in Newton, and had never once invited me to her house. My phone buzzed again. She's devastated, Dad, too. How could you choose strangers in uniforms over your own blood? I typed and deleted a dozen responses. I wanted to tell her about the night I'd called home from overseas, scared and homesick, only to have Mom lecture me about missing my cousin's wedding. I wanted to explain that I'd never chosen the military over family. I'd chosen myself over their version of who I should be. Instead, I wrote back, I hope they find peace with their decision. She never replied. The silence that followed felt familiar, like slipping into an old coat. I'd learned to wear it well during those long nights on base, when other soldiers got care packages and I got disciplinary reports about uniform infractions I'd never committed. Some people are born to be held close. Others are born to hold themselves. I ordered another coffee and started researching apartment listings. Chapter 3. I was there, but invisible. The funny thing about growing up military adjacent is that you learn to observe before you act. My childhood was spent watching my parents' friends, noting which conversations stopped when I entered a room, understanding which smiles were real and which were performance art. So when I walked into Morrison's Steakhouse the following Friday night, not to eat, just to pick up takeout, I spotted my parents immediately. They were sitting at their usual corner table, the one with the perfect view of the harbor, sharing a bottle of wine like they were celebrating something. My mother wore her pearl necklace, the one she only brought out for special occasions. My father had on his navy blazer, the one that made him look like the successful attorney he'd always wanted me to become. They looked happy, relaxed even. I stood behind a pillar near the bar, watching them laugh at something I couldn't hear. The hostess asked if I needed help and I mumbled something about waiting for my order, never taking my eyes off the scene unfolding 30 feet away. They looked like strange, or maybe they looked like themselves for the first time in years, unburdened by the disappointment of having a daughter who'd chosen a different path. Your order's ready, miss, the hostess said, but I was already studying the restaurant with different eyes. The way the light hit the window, The steady stream of customers, the location that was prime real estate in a city where good locations were harder to find than honest politicians. I took my bag of food and walked past their table on my way out, close enough to smell my mother's perfume, close enough to hear my father say, "It's better this way, Margaret, cleaner." They never saw me. I'd gotten good at being invisible. Chapter 4. The decision that changed everything. The idea came to me 3 weeks later, during a particularly boring staff meeting at Hanscom Air Force Base. Colonel Martinez was droning on about budget allocations when my phone buzzed with a notification I'd been expecting. My trust fund had finally vested. It was money I'd forgotten about, set up by my grandmother before she died when I was 12. The woman who'd taught me to play chess and told me that patience was the most powerful weapon a smart woman could possess. "Wait for the right moment, Emily," she used to say, "then make your move count." The amount was substantial. More substantial than I'd remember. Enough to buy a nice house or a car, or maybe something that would give me more satisfaction than either of those things. I left the meeting early and drove back into the city, parking outside Morrison's Steakhouse. The for sale sign in the window was small, almost apologetic. I called the number. "Morrison's." "Yeah, it's been on the market for 6 months," the realtor said. "The owners are getting older. Want to retire to Florida. Beautiful property. Established clientele, but it's going to need someone who understands the restaurant business." I made an appointment for the next day. The current owner, a tired-looking man named Paul Morrison, walked me through the space with the reverence of someone showing off a lifetime's work. The kitchen was industrial but well maintained. The dining room had character: exposed brick, hardwood floors, windows that caught the afternoon light just right. "We've been here 23 years, he said, running his hand along the mahogany bar. "It's been a good life, but my wife wants to see grandkids more than twice a year." I asked the right questions, nodded at the right moments, and tried not to smile when he quoted a price that was well within my budget. "I'll have an answer for you by Friday," I said. That night I called my financial advisor. By Thursday I was pre-approved for everything I'd need. Chapter 5. Coming back wasn't the plan. But I did. The closing took place on a gray November morning that felt like the city was holding its breath. I signed papers in a conference room that smelled like coffee and ambition, watching Paul Morrison's wife dab her eyes with tissues while her husband shook my hand. "Take care of our baby," he said, and I promised I would. I didn't tell anyone at the base what I'd done. When they asked why I'd taken a week of leave, I said I was dealing with family business. It wasn't entirely a lie. The restaurant came with a full staff, a reservation system that went back 3 months, and a reputation that had taken decades to build. I spent my first day as owner sitting in the office upstairs, reading through customer files and trying to understand what I'd gotten myself into. Most of the reservations were regulars: anniversary dinners, business meetings, birthday celebrations, people who'd been coming here for years, who trusted Morrison's to provide the backdrop for their important moments. Then I found the one I'd been looking for. Bennett Party of 4, November 23rd, 7:30 p.m. Special occasion anniversary dinner. My parents' 32nd wedding anniversary. They'd been coming here every year since I was in high school, back when they still pretended I was part of their perfect family portrait. I stared at the reservation for a long time, my grandmother's voice echoing in my memory. "Wait for the right moment, Emily, then make your move count." The moment had arrived. Chapter 6. Everything was the same, except me. I spent the next 2 weeks learning everything I could about running a restaurant. The staff was patient with my questions, probably assuming I was another rich kid playing with daddy's money. They had no idea I'd grown up 3 tax brackets below them, or that I knew how to field strip an M4 rifle in under 2 minutes. The general manager, a sharp woman named Sophia, who'd been there for 8 years, became my unofficial mentor. She taught me how to read the nightly reports, how to handle difficult customers, and which suppliers were worth their premium prices. "You're different than I expected," she said one evening as we closed up together. "How so?" "Most people who buy restaurants like this want to change everything immediately, make their mark. You know, you're watching, learning." She paused, wiping down the bar with practiced efficiency. "It's smart." I'd learned the value of observation during my years in service. You watch first, understand the terrain, then make your moves with precision. Rushing in without intelligence gets people hurt. The restaurant ran itself. Mostly, the kitchen staff knew their jobs. the servers had their routines, and the customers kept coming. All I had to do was stay out of the way and learn. But late at night, when I was alone in the office doing paperwork, I'd find myself looking at that reservation. November 23rd. My parents' anniversary. The date circled in my mind like a target. I could have simply honored it, let them come and never know I was there. I could have called and told them what I'd done, maybe used it as an olive branch for reconciliation. Instead, I did something else entirely. Chapter 7. The silence revealed what was missing. On November 20th, 3 days before their reservation, I picked up the phone and dialed the number listed in the system. My mother answered on the second ring. Hello? Her voice was exactly the same. Polished, controlled, with that slight edge that meant she was busy and didn't appreciate interruptions. Mrs. Bennett, this is Morrison's Steakhouse calling about your reservation for November 23rd. A pause. Yes. Is there a problem? I'm afraid we're going to have to cancel your reservation. We're closed that evening due to a change in management. Change in management? What do you mean? We've been coming there for 15 years. I kept my voice professional. I understand, and I apologize for the inconvenience. The restaurant has been sold, and the new owner is making some adjustments to operations. This is ridiculous. My husband and I have our anniversary dinner there every year. Can't you make an exception? I'm sorry, but no exceptions are being made. I can recommend several other establishments if you'd like. The silence stretched between us, and for a moment I wondered if she could somehow recognize my voice through the professional mask I'd put on. But then she sighed, the sound of someone who'd been disappointed by service workers her entire life. Fine. We'll find somewhere else. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in the office afterward, staring at the phone and waiting to feel something. Guilt, regret, satisfaction. Instead, I felt empty. Like I'd just completed a training exercise that had been necessary but not particularly meaningful. Sophia knocked on the doorframe. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Just taking care of some business, I said, and crossed the Bennett reservation off the books with a red pen. Chapter 8. She thought no one would remember. Thanksgiving week brought a rush of customers wanting to celebrate before the holiday, and I threw myself into the work. There's something therapeutic about the controlled chaos of a busy restaurant, the precise timing, the clear objectives, the immediate feedback when something goes right or wrong. I was expediting orders in the kitchen when Sophia found me on November 23rd, holding a slip of paper with a confused expression. We've got a problem, she said. There's a couple at the door saying they have a reservation, but I can't find them in the system. I wiped my hands on my apron and followed her to the front, where my parents stood next to the hostess station, looking exactly like what they were. People who'd never been told no by a service industry worker in their lives. My father wore the same navy blazer from that night I'd seen them here weeks ago. My mother had on a black dress and those pearls, her signature armor for important occasions. They looked older than I remembered, but maybe that was just the harsh lighting near the entrance. I'm the manager, I said, stepping forward, but staying in the shadows near the bar. How can I help you? We have a reservation for 7:30, my father said, his lawyer voice in full effect. Bennett, party of... I pretended to check the book, running my finger down the page like I was searching. I'm sorry, but I don't see any reservation under that name. That's impossible, my mother interjected. We've had this reservation for months. We come here every year for our anniversary. Unfortunately, the previous management's reservation system was inconsistent. Many bookings were lost during the transition. My father's face was turning red, the way it always did when he felt his authority being challenged. This is unacceptable. Do you know who we are? And there it was, the question that had defined my childhood. Do you know who we are? As if their last name was supposed to open doors and part seas. As if being a Bennett was supposed to mean something to the rest of the world. I'm sure you're very important people, I said, keeping my voice steady, but I can't seat you without a reservation, and we're completely booked tonight. Get the owner, my mother demanded. I want to speak to whoever bought this place. I almost smiled. The owner isn't available this evening, but I'd be happy to put you on our waiting list for next month. They left angry, My father muttering something about the decline of customer service and my mother already pulling out her phone to find somewhere else. They never looked directly at me, never saw past the restaurant uniform and the professional demeanor. I watched them through the window as they walked to their car. Two people who'd spent 32 years together and still didn't know how to comfort each other when things didn't go their way. Chapter 9. A letter. A truth, a final word. That night, after the last customer had left and the staff had gone home, I sat in the office and did something I hadn't done since basic training. I wrote a letter by hand. Dear Mom and Dad, by now you've probably figured out that Morrison's has a new owner. And you might have even figured out who that owner is. If not, let me make it clear. I bought the restaurant where you've celebrated your anniversary for the past 15 years. I was the manager who turned you away tonight. I want you to know that this wasn't revenge. Revenge would have been letting you come in, serving you dinner, and then revealing myself while you were trapped at the table with your fake smiles and your careful work. Revenge would have been making a scene, embarrassing you in front of other customers. This was something else. This was me taking control of a narrative that you wrote without my input. For 28 years you've made decisions about my life, my worth, my place in your family. You decided I wasn't good enough for your law school dreams. You decided my military service was a betrayal of your values. You decided that loving me came with conditions I could never meet. So I decided something too. I decided that I don't need your approval to build a life. I decided that your disappointment in me isn't my emergency, and I decided that the little girl who used to cry herself to sleep wondering why she wasn't enough for her own parents deserved better than to keep begging for scraps of affection from people who see her as a failure. The restaurant is beautiful, by the way. Paul Morrison built something lasting here, something that brings people joy. I plan to honor that legacy while creating something new, something that welcomes people who've been told they don't belong elsewhere. You taught me that love has conditions. The military taught me that some battles aren't worth fighting, but my grandmother taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to play a game you can never win. I hope you find another place for your anniversary dinner. I hope it serves you exactly what you're looking for. Emily. I folded the letter carefully and put it in an envelope addressed to their house. The house where I'd grown up. The house where I'd learned that being yourself wasn't always enough. I didn't mail it that night. I put it in the desk drawer and locked it away, like a secret that belonged only to me. Chapter 10. The choice I made with peace in my heart. 6 months later, Morrison's, now called Bennett's Table, was thriving. We'd kept everything that worked and added touches that felt like home. Photographs of military families on the walls, a monthly dinner series for veterans, and a policy that no one who'd served their country ever paid full price for a meal. Sophia had been promoted to assistant manager, and the staff had grown to feel like the family I'd chosen instead of the one I'd been born into. We celebrated each other's birthdays, covered each other's shifts, and shared the kind of easy affection that comes from working towards something together. I never mailed the letter. Instead, I kept it in my desk as a reminder of who I used to be, the woman who needed her parents to understand her choices, who craved their approval even as she resented their conditions. That woman had written the letter. The woman I became didn't need to send. The restaurant became my answer to every question they'd never asked about who I really was. Every veteran who found community at our monthly dinners, every young person working their way through college in our kitchen, every family celebrating milestones in our dining room. They were all proof that building something meaningful was better than tearing something down. I heard through Claire that my parents found a new place for their anniversary dinners, an upscale steakhouse in Back Bay that apparently has much better service. She also mentioned that they'd driven past Bennett's Table once and commented that it looked common now, with its military photos and its casual atmosphere. I hope they're happy with their choice. I know I'm happy with mine. Last week, I got a letter in the mail. Not at the restaurant, but at my apartment. The return address was from a law firm I didn't recognize, and for a moment my heart stopped, whying it might be some kind of legal challenge from my parents. Instead, it was a note from my grandmother's estate attorney. Apparently, she'd left me one more gift, something that had been held in trust until I was settled and strong enough to use it wisely. It was the deed to her house in Concord, the one where I'd learned to play chess and where she'd taught me that patience was a weapon. The house where she'd told me over and over that I was enough exactly as I was. I'm thinking about turning it into a bed and breakfast for military families, a place where people in transition can find their footing, where service members on leave can feel at home. My grandmother always said that the best revenge was a life well lived. She was right as usual. But what she didn't tell me, what I had to learn on my own, was that the best life isn't lived in response to other people's expectations. It's lived in response to your own heart's compass, pointing toward the things that matter to you, guided by the people who see your worth without conditions. I kept the restaurant reservation book from that first week, with my parents' anniversary dinner crossed out in red ink. Sometimes I look at it and remember the woman who made that phone call, who thought she was striking back at people who'd hurt her. But that's not what happened. What happened was simpler and more powerful. I chose my own definition of family, my own version of success, my own way of moving through the world. And every night when I lock up Bennett's table and drive home to my apartment, overlooking the harbor, I know that I made the right choice. Not because it hurt them, but because it freed me. The little girl who used to cry herself to sleep wondering why she wasn't enough finally learned the truth. She was always enough. She just needed to find the right people to see it.